It was supposed to be just another evening in the city. It's a kind where lights glittered on wet pavement and strangers hurried past each other without a second glance. But for Emma, that night felt different. She stood outside the cafe, clutching a small, worn wallet in her hand. Inside was just $5, barely enough for a cup of coffee. It was all she could spare for this blind date, a meeting she wasn't even sure she should have agreed to. Yet, something about taking the chance, about stepping out of her routine, felt necessary. She wanted to believe that maybe life could surprise her. Across the street, James adjusted the sleeves of his tailored jacket. To everyone else, he looked like what he was: a successful CEO, a man who had everything. But appearances rarely told the whole story. Behind the confident stride and polished smile was a single dad who spent most of his nights trying to balance board meetings with bedtime stories. He wasn't looking for anything that night. He wasn't even supposed to notice her. But he did, the moment he saw Emma through the cafe window. Nervously tucking her hair behind her ear and ordering the cheapest thing on the menu, he found himself unable to look away. There was something raw, something genuine about her presence, so different from the polished world he was used to. It wasn't the dress she wore or the way she carried herself, but the quiet determination in her eyes. She didn't know it yet, but her simple choice to show up was about to change everything. As Emma sat waiting, 5 crumpled dollars placed neatly on the table. She had no idea someone nearby was watching her with growing curiosity. She didn't know that a single glance would pull her into a story bigger than she imagined. One that would test both her courage and his guarded heart. And just as their worlds were about to collide, the cafe door slowly opened. The bell above the cafe door chimed softly, and Emma's heart skipped as she looked up, half expecting to see the man her friend had set her up with. But it was just another customer. She lowered her gaze, fingers tracing the edge of her paper cup. She wondered if she should even be there. A blind date felt risky enough, but coming in with nothing more than $5? That was the part she couldn't shake. Still, she reminded herself that courage wasn't about having everything figured out. It was about showing up anyway. James stepped inside moments later, though not for her. At least, that's what he told himself. He was there to grab coffee before heading home, to clear his head after a long day of numbers and negotiations. But the truth was, something had drawn him in, an instinct he couldn't explain. He spotted Emma almost instantly, sitting alone, her posture giving away both nerves and strength. She didn't notice him, but he noticed everything: the way she tried to look composed, the way she pushed back her cup as if to make it last longer, as the cafe buzzed with quiet chatter. James ordered his drink, but kept his eyes nearby. He wasn't supposed to interfere. He had his own life, his own responsibilities, including a little boy waiting at home who thought the world of him. Yet, something about Emma reminded him of promises he once made to himself about honesty. About love that wasn't built on status or wealth. Emma checked her phone. No new messages, no sign of the man she was supposed to meet. The clock ticked on, and unease began to creep in. Was this another dead end? Another night wasted on hope. She didn't know that her story was already shifting. That the stranger, just a few tables away, was about to play a role she never imagined. Emma's phone buzzed at last. But instead of relief, a heavy knot formed in her stomach. A short message appeared on the screen: "Sorry, can't make it tonight." No explanation, no follow-up. It's just a handful of careless words that left her sitting in the cafe with her $5 and a quiet sense of defeat. She tried to force a smile, pretending it didn't matter. But the sting of rejection was harder to hide when she was already carrying so much. James caught the subtle shift in her expression. He wasn't close enough to read the message, but he didn't need to. He recognized disappointment when he saw it: the way her shoulders slumped, the way her gaze lingered on the untouched pastry she'd ordered, as if she'd lost her appetite. For a moment, he debated walking over, saying something kind, something simple. Yet the weight of his own life pressed against him. He wasn't a free man looking for chance encounters. He was a single father, a CEO whose every move was scrutinized. A man who had learned the hard way that emotions could complicate everything, but he also knew what it meant to be left behind. His ex-wife had walked away years ago, leaving him to raise his son alone while building a company from scratch. Trust had become difficult, but not impossible. And now, watching Emma, he felt that familiar, palthy, quiet reminder that sometimes the people who appeared the most fragile carried the strongest hearts. Emma, unaware of his thoughts, considered leaving. Yet something inside urged her to stay a little longer. Maybe it was stubborn hope. Maybe it was the quiet sense that her evening wasn't over yet. She didn't realize that her choice to linger was weaving her life closer to his, pulling two strangers into a story neither of them had planned. The question wasn't if their paths would cross, but how and what it would cost when they finally did. The cafe had grown quieter as the night stretched on, most of the customers already gone. Emma sat with her empty cup, staring out the window at the streetlights glowing against the dark. The cafe had grown quieter as the night stretched on, most of the customers already gone. Emma sat with her empty cup, staring out the window at the streetlights glowing against the dark. She told herself she should leave, yet something kept her rooted in that chair. As if walking away too soon would mean giving up on more than just a blind date. James was still nearby. His coffee long finished, but he hadn't moved either. He had business documents waiting for his signature and a son expecting him at home. But the sight of Emma alone tugged at something he couldn't ignore. Just as he thought about finally saying something, the door opened again and in walked a man in a sharp suit. Glancing around the cafe with a phone pressed to his ear, Emma froze. It wasn't the blind date she had expected. It was someone she recognized from a past she had tried hard to leave behind. Her breath caught as he spotted her, his smile cold and too familiar. He crossed the room with quick steps, ignoring the curious glances from others, and slid into the seat across from her without asking. James watched the scene unfold, his instincts immediately on edge. He couldn't hear the words, but he saw the tension in Emma's shoulders, the way her hand clenched against the table. Whoever this man was, it wasn't just a stranger interrupting her night. He was a complication she clearly didn't want. The man leaned in closer. His voice low, but Emma's strained expression told James enough. Something wasn't right. This wasn't the kind of meeting anyone would choose. The room seemed to shrink with the pressure of unspoken words. And James felt himself caught in a choice he hadn't expected. Walk away and keep his distance, or step into a story that might unravel more than he was ready for. And as Emma's eyes flickered up, briefly meeting his across the cafe, James realized that decision was coming faster than either of them could prepare for. The silence between Emma and the man across from her grew heavy, thick with words left unsaid. He leaned closer, his voice sharp now, and though others in the cafe pretended not to notice, James could no longer sit still. He rose, every step carrying the weight of a choice he knew might change everything. When he reached their table, he placed a steady hand on the back of Emma's chair. His presence quiet, but firm. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his tone calm yet edged with authority. Emma's lips parted, caught between admitting the truth and brushing it off. But the man in the suit sneered, brushing James off with a dismissive wave. "This doesn't concern you." James didn't move. His gaze remained locked on Emma, waiting for her answer. She hesitated, then finally shook her head. "No, it doesn't feel right." Her words were soft but strong enough to break the spell. The man's smirk faded. He stood abruptly, muttering under his breath before storming out, leaving behind the sharp scent of cologne and a trail of questions. Relief washed over Emma, though her hands still trembled. James slid into the empty chair across from her, offering nothing but quiet understanding. For the first time that night, she didn't feel alone. They sat in stillness for a moment. And in that silence, a fragile connection formed to strangers bound by an unplanned encounter. James knew he had crossed an invisible line, one that would ripple into his carefully guarded life. Emma, too, realized that fate had handed her more than a ruined blind date. Just as she began to thank him, James's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression tightening. A single message glared back at him. "We need to talk about Emma." The world seemed to tilt. The man who had just left wasn't random at all. He was tied to a story neither Emma nor James fully understood. And suddenly, their night wasn't just about chance meetings, but secrets that could upend both of their lives. The silence between Emma and the man across from her grew heavy, thick with words left unsaid. He leaned closer, his voice sharp now, and though others in the cafe pretended not to notice, James could no longer sit still. He rose, every step carrying the weight of a choice he knew might change everything. When he reached their table, he placed a steady hand on the back of Emma's.